At the beginning of 1947, another expedition of the legendary American polar explorer, Richard Byrd, approached the shores of Antarctica. It was a very strange expedition. Unlike the first three, it was completely financed by the U.S. military and had a military codename, Operation High Jump. Under Admiral Byrd's command, a powerful naval group consisting of an aircraft carrier, 12 surface ships, more than 24 aircraft and helicopters, and about 5,000 personnel was assembled. You have to agree, this is a strange composition for a scientific expedition. On December 2, 1946, before leaving for Antarctica, Admiral Byrd told the press, "My expedition is of a military nature," but he didn't provide any details. In late January 1947, the reconnaissance of the Antarctic continent in the area of the Land of Everything was going according to plan, with tens of thousands of aerial photographs taken, and then something mysterious happened. Suddenly, the inexplicable happens. The expedition, which was planned for 6 months, was hastily terminated after just 2 months and left the shores of Antarctica. It seemed an escape of sorts. Nearly half of the deck aviation was lost, dozens of sailors and officers were lost. A member of the Extraordinary Investigative Commission of the U.S. Congress, Admiral Byrd, stated the following: "In the event of a new war, America may be attacked by an enemy capable of flying from one pole to another at incredible speed." 1.5 years before Admiral Byrd's expedition, in the summer of 1945, 2 German submarines entered the Argentine port of Mar del Plata and surrendered to the authorities. They were unusual boats from the so-called Führer's Convoy. This top-secret unit carried out tasks, the details of which are still deeply classified. Submarine crews were reluctant to provide information, but the Americans managed to learn something. Commander of the 530 shared her involvement in Operation Valkyrie 2, 3 weeks before the end of the war. On board the submarine were passengers whose faces were covered with bandages, as well as relics of the Third Reich. The commander of another submarine, the U-977, later revealed that he followed the same route. It was also discovered that German submarines had repeatedly gone to Antarctica. But why there? Antarctica was originally discovered in 1820 by Russian explorers Bellingshausen and Lazarev. Since then, this mysterious continent, with an area larger than Europe, has been like a magnet attracting explorers to itself. However, steep ice cliffs tens of meters high made the continent impassable for a long time. For almost a century, almost nothing was known about Antarctica, and only the coastlines were mapped. And suddenly, distant and useless ice continent attracts Germany's inexplicable interest. Huge resources were allocated for the study of Antarctica in the late 1930s, and 2 scientific expeditions were organized. This was just before the war, which was about to break out any day. In January 1939, 2 planes, the Passat and the Boris, took off from the Swabian coast with the help of catapults and began reconnaissance of Queen Maud Land. Within 3 weeks, Luftwaffe pilots marked out a territory larger than Germany using metal pennants with swastikas. It was named New Swabia. In April 1939, the expedition commander, experienced polar captain Alfred Schurz, reported that he had completed the mission entrusted to him by Marshal Göring. For the first time, German planes flew over the Antarctic continent. Every 25 kilometers, our planes dropped pennants. We covered an area of approximately 600,000 square meters, of which 350,000 were photographed from the air. Göring's wasps had done their job. The mysterious relay was taken up by Admiral Karl Donitz's Sea Wolves, submarines of the Führer's convoy. They secretly headed for the shores of the icy Antarctica, and after a while, Donitz relayed a strange phrase. "My submariners have found an earthly paradise." In 1943, Germany uttered an equally mysterious phrase. Germany can be proud of what it has created at the other end of the world. It has built an impregnable fortress for the Führer. At that time, the commander-in-chief of the German Navy only informed a very narrow circle of people. Today, we can assume that Grand Admiral Donitz was referring to the recently discovered huge lakes under a kilometer-thick layer of ice in Antarctica. The water temperature in them is plus 18 degrees Celsius. Above the surface of the water are dome-shaped vaults filled with warm air. It is possible that real rivers of warm water flow from these lakes into the ocean, constantly heated from below. Over thousands of years, they could have created huge tunnels under the ice and underground, ideal for setting up secret bases. From the ocean side, any submarine could easily dive under the coastal ice, and any secret base located there would be completely hidden from the enemy's eyes and out of reach. If the Germans had decided to establish some secret bases or create secret enclaves with the status of extraterritoriality, then polar regions, including Antarctica, were a natural area for such bases or enclaves. Based on the documents and memoirs of the participants in these events, it appears that the Nazis actually created a top-secret base in Antarctica. It was codenamed Base 211 and was established in early 1939. Regular flights of a specially converted research ship, the Schwabenland, began between Antarctica and Germany. Mining equipment and other machinery were transported to Queen Maud Land, including railroads, mine carts, and huge tunnel-boring machines. Highly skilled scientists and engineers and workers are staying there. Various assumptions are being made about why Germany needed such a remote base. Some believe that Germany wanted to control the southern seas, while others believe that Germany was attracted by the useful minerals found in Antarctica, especially uranium, which is essential for creating superweapons. Still, others claim that a shelter for the elite of the Third Reich was being prepared in Antarctica in case of defeat in the war, and supposedly, the transfer of its future residents, not only scientists and specialists but also representatives of the Nazi Party and the state, began there in 1942. Secret productions were also allegedly being moved there from Germany. After the war, the Americans, who actively recruited German scientists to work in the United States, were surprised to discover that thousands of highly skilled specialists from the Third Reich had disappeared without a trace, including over 100 submarines. It is possible that American intelligence did indeed have some information that part of some legacy of technical potential and scientists were indeed exported from Germany, and naturally, the Antarctic polar zones were within their attention. Moreover, there are testimonies from German submariners who surrendered to Argentine authorities. Apparently, all of this greatly alarmed the Americans, and in late 1946, the famous polar explorer and admiral of the U.S. Navy, Richard Byrd, received an order to destroy the Nazi base in Antarctica. But it wasn't that simple. The resistance that the American squadron encountered still raises a lot of questions. The thing is that in Washington, Admiral Byrd didn't just report on fighters with unimaginable capabilities. He talked about an attack on the expedition by strange flying saucers that emerged from under the water and, moving at tremendous speed, inflicted significant damage on the expedition. This is how another eyewitness and participant in the expedition, experienced military pilot John describes the battle that took place on February 26, 1947. They popped out of the water like crazy, and they shot through between the mast headlights so fast that the disturbed airstream tore the radio antennas off. Several corsairs took off from Casablanca. I didn't have time to blink before 2 of them were downed by some unknown ray from the nose of those things. They buried themselves in the water near the ships. At that time, I was on the deck of the Casablanca. I didn't understand anything. These objects didn't make a single sound. They silently darted between the ships and continuously spewed deadly fire. Suddenly, the destroyer Murdoch, which was 10 cable lengths away from us, burst into bright flames and began to sink. Despite the danger, rescue boats and boats were immediately sent to the scene of the disaster. The nightmare continued for about 20 minutes when the flying saucers dove underwater again. We began to count the losses, and they were horrifying. Who was the owner of these saucers? Was it Nazi Germany? Who was the owner of these saucers? Was it Nazi Germany? In the post-war years, intriguing photographs and drawings were discovered in the secret Nazi archives. They unequivocally show that German scientists were indeed working on the development of disc-shaped flying machines. Nothing like this existed in the world at that time. How did Nazi scientists and engineers manage to make such a technological leap? The most mysterious organization of the Third Reich, NNRB, is still being hunted by intelligence services of leading countries. It is not surprising, for it is the only known organization in history that studied magic and mysticism with the official support and financing of the state. No organization had as much information at its disposal or had as much influence on the development of magical technologies as the initiators of the creation of NNRB. The highest ranks of the Reich were the ones who initiated the study of occult knowledge and paranormal phenomena in Nazi Germany, with the blessing of Heinrich Himmler, who acted not only on his own initiative but also under the guidance of Adolf Hitler. Officially, the society was created in 1935 and was intended to study the historical roots of the German nation. Thus it translates to the heritage of ancestors. However, the field of interest of this society was much wider than just the study of ancient Germanic history. The leaders of the Third Reich understood that they would not be able to win future wars simply by the sheer numbers of their army. Therefore, the concept of so-called qualitative superiority was introduced, which implied that they could win with fewer forces in terms of quantity, but higher forces in terms of quality. It was precisely to ensure this so-called qualitative superiority that the NNRB attracted its specialists in occult and non-traditional knowledge, in order to achieve a breakthrough in those areas where their opponents were incompetent. The ideology of Nazism was based on the idea that there once existed a powerful civilization on Earth that had access to almost all of the secret realms, and somewhere scattered were preserved these higher knowledge. It was these that should contribute to the revival of the superhuman in Germany, the descendants of the ancient ones. Atlantis, which Nazi scientists believed was the primordial home of the Aryan race, was of particular interest. Germany, by right, should possess the technological knowledge of the Atlanteans, who, according to legend, were able to build huge sea vessels and airships powered by unknown forces. To search for hidden knowledge, one could look into the history and origins of civilizations, such as the Germanic and Indo-Germanic civilizations, as well as any civilization in the world. Perhaps NNRB started doing this even before the war. Without a doubt, one remarkable map, discovered by historians in 1929, was already known to an Ahnenerbe employee. This map sparked the imagination of people even today. According to the verdict of U.S. Air Force experts, the coastline was depicted on the map before it was covered by ice. The ice on this territory is approximately 1.5 kilometers thick, and we have no idea how this data could have been obtained in 1513. International expeditions that investigated the Piri Reis map came to the conclusion that it was more accurate than maps created in the 20th century. This map sparked the imagination of people even today. According to the verdict of U.S. Air Force experts, the coastline was depicted on the map before it was covered by ice. The ice on this territory is approximately 1.5 kilometers thick, and we have no idea how this data could have been obtained in 1513. International expeditions that investigated the Piri Reis map came to the conclusion that it was more accurate than maps created in the 20th century. Seismic surveying confirmed what some people had not guessed until recently. Some mountains that were considered part of a single massif are actually islands, as indicated on the old map. One can imagine the impression that the Piri Reis map made on adherents of Aryan theory in the 1930s. Above all, it instilled hope in the search for technomagical legacy of the Atlanteans, since according to one hypothesis, Antarctica was the former Atlantis that ended up under the ice as a result of pole shifts. If such maps exist, then other secret knowledge can also be preserved somewhere. Where is the secret Ahnenerbe expedition looking for ancient relics and ancient manuscripts? They are particularly interested in the archives of the Knights Templar, who, according to some signs, visited America long before Columbus. Apparently, the Templars possessed secret manuscripts similar to the Piri Reis map, and therefore could have known something important about Antarctica. Special SS commandos seize collections from libraries on occupied territories, libraries of various secret societies, as soon as they can be found. One of the librarians witnessed that in March of 1945, when Soviet troops were already approaching German territory, 140,000 volumes of the catalogue of this library would have been very interesting. It is not excluded that the NERB learned about Antarctica, something that made it one of its main goals. In essence, the SS were looking for special knowledge, that same Grail cup that, together with the sacred spear, opens the way to world domination. Hitler heard this legend before the First World War, with the Spear of Destiny being one of the key elements. The Grail was missing from his collection in order to achieve world domination and subject it to the chosen race using magical knowledge and technologies. The best specialists, often scientists with a worldwide reputation, were attracted to the scientific research in the NRB. Hundreds of employees from more than 50 institutes and departments of Ahnenergo are engaged in mathematics and astronomy, genetics and medicine, magic and dowsing, developing non-traditional weapons, methods of psychological and psychotropic impact on the masses, delving into occult sciences, religious mystical practices, and studying paranormal human abilities. One of the main tasks set by NRB specialists is to use paranormal abilities to establish contact with higher unknown entities, or as they were called, external minds, to obtain super knowledge of technological character from highly developed extraterrestrial and ancient earthly civilizations. There was an experiment of this kind. Part 3 Discs. In December 1919, members of the Tula Secret Society, a predecessor of the Ananarb, gathered in the foothills of Halp in the forester's house near Birchtesgaden. Among the chosen ones were two experienced mediums and contactees, as we would call them today. One of them was hiding under the mystical name of Sigmund, the other was Maria Orsic from Zagreb. In a trance state, she tells strange things. She received information from the constellation Taurus civilization, amazing technical information, which does not shock anyone, but rather arouses great interest. It arouses great interest because it is about the construction of an unusual flying apparatus, which also allows changing the course of time around it. This is a step towards the dream of the secret society in a time machine that will allow penetrating deep into history and obtaining knowledge of ancient high civilizations. We see a drawing of an aircraft from the otherworldly world with the signature of the famous German scientist and inventor Victor Schauberger. The knowledge obtained is passed on to leading scientists for translation into understandable engineering language. The first model was built in 1922, and the device has 3 parallel discs arranged. During operation, the lower and upper discs rotate in opposite directions, creating a very strong field and anti-gravity effect, if one believes the testimonies. This design not only flew in the air but also changed the structure of time around it. There is an opinion that this techno-magical device became a prototype for future flying discs based on non-classical flight principles. Special technological units of the SS were involved in the development of these super discs. 2 main ideas dominated the consciousness of the Nazi leadership. The first is the idea of creating a superhuman, and the second is the very important aspect of mastering energy. This includes not only the ability to master nuclear energy, but also disc-shaped flying apparatus, that is, creating fundamentally new types of flying equipment. The search for ideas is going in all directions, and not only mediums and engineers, but also historians are involved in them. Designers tried to understand the principle of rotation of super disks and creating anti-gravity, but it is not enough. They need engines, but there are none. The technology hopelessly lags behind promising ideas. In July 1934, Hitler and the top of the Tula Secret Society invite inventor Victor Schauberger for cooperation in Rio. His legendary explosive engine can generate light, heat, and move mechanisms using only air and water. The inventor is required to create an engine specifically for flying discs. The agreement is obtained, and 5 years later, in 1939, a test model of the disc with an engine takes off in Rio. A rare photo of the test flight is preserved with winter masks. However, the work on technological discs is progressing slowly because there is no experience or specialists in this field, so they have to take extraordinary measures. The development of superdiscs is being carried out by Special Technological Division SS, and the main ideas of the Third Reich are the creation of a superhuman and the development of new types of flying. With regards to the Germans' technological advancements, Professor German Overm has been compared to Art Tsiolkovsky and was the teacher of Werner von Braun. By the end of 1942, the Germans were reportedly flying armed flying discs called Vril 1, with a diameter of 11.5 meters. It is claimed that 17 such devices were manufactured by the end of the war, but these statements should be treated with caution. They were likely to be used as reconnaissance tools and were practically invisible when viewed from a distance. Among the captured designs and photographs of flying discs, the Haunebu series stands out. According to descriptions, they were to use an alternative energy source called the Hans Kohler converter, which did not require traditional fuel. Haunebu 3 was even planned for space travel. One of the trophy photographs shows a pilot in an unusual spacesuit, suggesting that flights were planned for at least the stratosphere. Another mysterious document is a diagram of a 139-meter-long cigar-shaped spacecraft called Andromeda, designed for transporting 5 flying discs of the Haunebu 2 type. Some suggest that it was designed for long-term space travel, while others believe it was a project for an underwater container that could transport cargo and equipment to secret Third Reich bases, including those in Antarctica. According to American intelligence, by the end of the war, the Germans had 9 research facilities where flying discs were being developed and tested. Investigation revealed that 8 of these facilities, along with their scientists and key figures, were successfully evacuated from Germany. The 9th facility was destroyed. One is still believed to be active in Brazil. There are many others. Classified information indicates that some of these research enterprises were transported to Antarctica under the name New Swabia. At least one enterprise for the development of discs was transported there, another to the region of Amazon 3 on the northern coast of Norway. They were evacuated to secret underground facilities. To implement grandiose plans, the Third Reich ran out of time. Apparently, by the end of the war, technological disc-shaped aircraft did not reach the stage of industrial production, and in 1947, it was probably not them in Antarctica. Perhaps they were German discs that flew on more classical principles, the same ones that were developed in the Third Reich as insurance for technological projects. There were many such models created by the Germans, some of which performed quite well. It was a colossal leap in the technology of such discs. Germany's opponents had nothing like it, but these discs were far from what the Reich leaders had dreamed of. The models created by the Germans could only work in the air or at least fly on solid or water surfaces, just like hovercrafts fly now. This is because they were all so-called ventilators. They did have some advantages compared to conventional aircraft. The disc proved it could hover in the air without turning around, fly forward and backward. The success was undeniable. According to some reports, in just 3 minutes that day, an unmanned version of the disc covered 18 kilometers and developed a horizontal speed of 2,200 kilometers per hour. The disc proved it could hover in the air without turning around, fly forward and backward. The success was undeniable. But the war is already raging on German soil, and the Nazis were destroying prototypes of unusual aircraft. As far as the West knew, the only version of the high-speed disc was destroyed. The developer of its main engine, Victor Schauberger, later recalled that the model tested in February 1945 was built in collaboration with first-class engineers and specialists in explosives among prisoners of the Mauthausen concentration camp. Then they were taken to the camp. It was the end for them. The model was blown up on Keitel's orders. So beautiful drawings where this disc is depicted over the Antarctic base are just the imagination of the artist. One should not trust other drawings and photographs too much. Only mock-ups of discs needed to work out individual parameters or to show the command in order to obtain funding approval. Credit must be given to the talent of German scientists and engineers. They achieved great success, and the leap that the Third Reich made in science and technology was not accidental. The combination of scientific research with an unbiased analysis of ancient knowledge gave a qualitative leap. But the collapse that the Nazis suffered was not accidental either. After all, the Grail Cup is not only a symbol of ancient knowledge, but also of centuries of moral experience, which the Nazis consciously rejected. There are many legends and rumors associated with the Third Reich's discs. Apparently, stories of German discs emerging from under the water in Antarctica in 1947 can also be attributed to this category. If we are talking about takeoffs from the water that were recorded in the 1940s, this is largely observed now during flights of flying objects, and so on. I am sure that in 1947 the Germans could not have had such devices. Objects that fly out from under the water, glowing plates, balls, cigars, and similar objects in polar and adjacent regions are not uncommon. Unidentified flying objects are observed everywhere in northern countries, South America, Australia, and South Africa. Reports about them regularly came to the Soviet naval intelligence. As the head of the fleet intelligence, I periodically received reports of such discovered objects in the form of reports from eyewitnesses. It would be wrong to think that unidentified flying objects were only observed in the north. They were observed throughout the Atlantic, even in the southern Atlantic, in the region of Antarctica. In particular, I know of one case when they were observed in the area of the South Georgia Islands. Then fishermen discovered an object that emerged from under the water, which they managed to photograph, and it is shown in these pictures. Despite the strong wind, the object stayed in one place for quite a long time. It was clearly not a cloud or an air balloon. It was observed over South Georgia Island for a considerable period, both before and after sunset, for about an hour and a half. The object had a fairly regular round shape and stood out on it. At night, this triangle not only shone, but also lights were observed, as if engines were working, although the object was in the same place. Observations of these objects took place in 1979, 3 years after Japanese researchers, using the latest equipment, detected 19 circular objects that plummeted from space to Antarctica and disappeared from the screens. What are these objects, and where do they come from? Hello? Today, a very unexpected version emerged at the end of the 1980s. The works of the leading American astrophysicist Kip Thorne and his colleagues received a great resonance in the world of science. They substantiated the possibility of almost instant movement in space and time travel. They put forward the idea of wormhole transitions, which is extremely intriguing. According to this theory, black holes are in close proximity to our planet and take the form of wormhole transitions. These wormhole transitions, in principle, make it possible to make intergalactic and interstellar flights. As the scientists themselves claim, their work has practical significance, in particular, for creating a time machine and providing intergalactic travel. Thorne came to the conclusion that near the Earth there is an entrance to the wormhole tunnel leading to the Vega star region. Apparently, by that time, the Americans already knew or imagined how the appearance and disappearance of UFOs in the atmosphere of our planet occurred. In 1992, construction of a powerful radioelectronic complex called HARP began in Alaska, officially for the study of the ionosphere and the development of missile defense systems, unofficially for the development of new types of weapons, geophysical, climatic, psychotronic, essentially a massive ray gun, a global microwave. However, the similarities do not end there. To this day, we can safely assume that the main purpose of this station is precisely the search for this entrance to the wormhole. In other words, the Americans came to the conclusion that it is in this polar region that the entrance to the wormhole may be located. The station's radio emissions allow a similar emitter was put into operation on Alaska. The third, even more powerful one, is being built in Greenland. The technical capabilities of other territories would, in principle, have been sufficient to control one portal. However, the Earth has two poles. What is the role of each of them from the point of view of this hypothesis? For example, they are used simultaneously for entry and exit. Or, for example, the Alaskan portal is used for entry, and Antarctica for exit, or vice versa. The theory of tonal effects does not contradict the fact that the North Pole of our Earth is the entrance, and the South Pole is the exit for the channel of energy information that connects our planet with other planets. It is not excluded that these properties of the poles are used to connect with other parts of the universe. In any case, this deserves serious research, and it is not accidental that, for example, it is well known that a large part of the employees of American Antarctic stations are employees of the National Security Agency of the United States and of Military Technical Reconnaissance, Electronic Intelligence. Perhaps the scientists of the Third Reich also assumed that the Arctic and Antarctica are not just terrestrial poles, and it may not be accidental that the theory of the pole and the Earth was so popular in Nazi Germany, where the poles were represented as gates to some other space. Maybe the insane idea of something similar to today's wormhole transitions lay at the heart of this idea, and it was precisely the possibility of time and space travel that attracted the Germans to Antarctica. The sixth continent continues to keep its secrets, and with each passing year, there are only more questions. Was the construction of creating flying discs stopped after the war, or did they continue in other secret areas of the globe? Is it worth attributing unidentified flying objects to modern secret developments, as such objects have been observed for a very long time, even in the time of Alexander the Great? What kind of objects emerged from the water and attacked Admiral Byrd's squadron? Are there great unknown forces cooperating with humanity that the Germans were so eager to establish a connection with? Is it a myth, or do these forces actually exist within our cavernous Earth, leading their private existence on Earth possibly since before humans existed?